back and I am finally ready to tell you about year-end fatigue, or rather tell you what year-end fatigue is without getting distracted, hopefully.
Have been Hello dudes and dudesses. Welcome back to Macked the podcast. I am your host Marlies McKenzie, and on today's news is greetings to you all and welcome to Macked the podcast. I'm your host Marlies McKenzie. Okay, I have no idea why I just did that, but like it sounded so cool in my head. So it's October. I think that means we're like 2 months shy of 2024 officially, and I think it's pretty wild. It's been a long year. It's been a year that is just literally a summary of life, and what I mean with that is that it has been fair, it has been unfair. It's had its ups and downs, but reality is we're here now. And today's podcast is going to be centered around year-end fatigue. And I wanted to tailor this particularly to university students, but I kind of like think that I will sort of be alternating between the general population and also cater it to university students in a sense. And I hope that as we continue in this episode, that will kind of become more apparent, hopefully. So the first thing was I was thinking that I've been really tired lately. I've been tired, I've been exhausted, I have been demotivated in a sense, or rather like the motivation is still there, but just the execution part of it, the action part of it, I've had thoughts and of things, ideas of things that I want to do, but just the whole idea of getting out of bed has kind of been challenging for me lately. But I've been doing it anyway, regardless. Looking at like starting your day at 7. Some days you start your day at 6. Some days you start your day at 11. Some days you start them at 1, at 3. Just a matter of kind of like being out of routine. Which also, if I'm being honest with myself and with you, entirely honest, that is, this entire year I've been struggling with like finding my footing. I've been struggling with getting back into a routine. Like I used to be a person who had like a solid routine last year, and this year has just really started like, it just really felt like the year is starting, and you still feel like the year is starting only to realize that like, hey, you left with 2 months and a couple of days until the year is over, and you still haven't found a solid routine. And what I mean by that is it's very important for me to have my morning routine that consists of watching cartoons, reading scripture, working out, having a decent breakfast, because chances are the next time I eat will be in the late afternoon or it would be in the evening. Yes, in between the day I'm still like eating something, but it's never something heavy or something serious. You get, like, it's not a priority, and I think that's also the case for most people. So having a morning routine for me is very important. I kind of do have an evening routine, but I don't necessarily like, it's not that strict, and it's not as much of a priority to me like my morning routine is. So that's just kind of like been something that I have been struggling with this past year. And what I mean this past year, since the year started really, just finding my footing. Whereas like I would still have these elements of my routine, but I haven't been staying consistent in them, or rather I haven't been doing them as I would, where I know that, okay, I just woke up, first order of business, drink water. After drinking water, you watch cartoons. After watching cartoons, you have scripture. After scripture, you work out. It's just kind of been like, I still do all those things, but I don't necessarily do them in the order that I used to, and it's just kind of like really been hard in a sense. And I think that there are a couple of contributing factors to that, but I think that it would have to be a separate episode, because now we're going to end up having an episode on routines and endure fatigue, and I think that those are like, yeah, they correlate, but they're entirely different things. So yeah, so basically you kind of now know why I wanted to talk about endure fatigue, especially as a uni student, but I think more so especially as a university student who also has a career life and hobbies that are somewhat a career to them and are that important, I suppose. So basically balancing your academic life and your non-academic life and your career life, because I was going to say your personal life, but considering it, all these things are personal. They contribute to who you are, they are a part of you, and perhaps you're a part of them too. That is supposed to make sense. If it doesn't make sense, I don't know if it doesn't make sense. I don't know. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of like share that with you before we get into what year-end fatigue is. And basically I took the liberty of like just going on the internet, searching for like a simple thingy definition of what year-end fatigue is, because I was like, yeah, I know what year-end fatigue is, but like it would always be better to have more like a general commonly used definition. And what I got off the internet is that year-end fatigue is also known as year-end burnout or end of semester exhaustion. The end of semester exhaustion is just so in relation to being a university student, whereas like I think a lot of university students over the past 2 weeks, like roundabout from the 25th of September going on to like the first 2 weeks of October, I think we have been going through it. I know that this past week I had submissions every day. Like there was something to do every day. I had to meet deadlines. I remember what I mean by every day. I had one module that was due on Thursday. I had another that was due on Friday, and the Tuesday of that very week I had a test open, but then I only took the test on the Wednesday, and I had quizzes that I had not completed because I found out that like you have to get a certain amount. You have to get at least, this was psychology particularly, that you have to get 12 out of 16, no, 12 out of 15 at least to qualify for the 10% that they're giving out. So we had like 3 quizzes, and it's that while there still are, of course, like it's multiple choice questions, lovely, and there is some theoretical work, but then there's also calculations, and I am not necessarily a maths person. Like there was a point where I was really convinced that I am dyscalculus, and sometimes I still really think that I'm dyscalculus, so I try to like stay away from numbers, like sorting out equations. But don't get me wrong, I love my money and I will count my money and my money will make sense. That I can guarantee you. So yeah, it was literally just that, and luckily the test was closing on the 30th of September, which was yesterday. I am recording this on a Sunday, the 1st of October. So I decided to finally rewrite all the quizzes. The aim was to get at least 12, but if I could get 15, lovely. I remember that before I took the test, I had written 2 tests, 2 quizzes rather already, and the one quiz I got an 8 out of 15. The other quiz I got a 9, and then so when I wrote it, I was like, okay, my marks are decent. They're not distinctions for psychology, but I'm like, I know that that is not necessarily a priority for me. So also in terms of like my academics, I have my priorities. I'm like, okay, this one module, I like it, but I don't see a future in it. So I am going to do the work that I'm required to do to get my degree, and I will do it to the best of my abilities, but I'm not going to do it to the best of my abilities so much so that I don't necessarily consider. So like out of 100%, I would probably give this psychology module, I would probably give it like 50-60%, rank it 50 or 60% in terms of priorities, whereas like my other module would be higher than that. My sociology, I'm literally giving it my all, like I have to get a distinction. And then my ethics kind of like ranks second on the thingy. So it's like sociology, ethics, and then finally psychology. Essentially, that is what I'm trying to say in terms of prioritization as far as academics are concerned. And I think that it also really depends on the goal that you have for yourself and your life entirely or holistically, because if you know that like you are planning on going in an academic kind of career and you are trying to pursue something, it would be best to focus on academics. But when you consider the kind of life that I am trying to get into, which may not always seem a bit clear to everyone, and I don't think that it has to, because it's a matter of how I wanted to pan out, how I needed to pan out, and how I am called to let it pan out, I suppose, or rather how I feel I am called in a sense. But like, we're not going to get too deep into like the spiritual sense of it. But essentially, yeah, that is pretty much it. So you can imagine that it was like a very hectic week. So then on Saturday, I took the third quiz, which I had not taken because I got discouraged when I found out that it's 10% on nothing. And I was like, I wasn't ready for 10% on nothing. I was ready to like, out of that 10%, to get like a 7% or like a 8%. I would like, because I mean, in order to get like 100%, that 10% you'd have gotten to like, yeah, you'd have to get at least like 80 for all three, or you'd have to get every mark, what is it, every quiz you'd have to like get all the questions correct, right? Which was not a priority for me, like I said. So then cool, I went to Spa, I came back, and basically along the way I was just really debating if I want to do it. I was like, is this really worth it? Because in my mind I was like, yeah, I want the marks, but I'm really tired. And then like I spoke to a friend, she was like, you're gonna regret this. And I was really thinking about it. I was like, yeah, I know I'm going to regret it, but I also don't want to do it. I want to do it. So I eventually did do it. I think the one quiz I went over, I did like twice over, and then I did the other one that I had gotten an 8. I did the other finally, and basically I was like doing it, taking a break when I really couldn't, and realizing that like, okay, no way I have to take this again because I'm still not getting the 12 that I need in order to get the 10 thingy. So I would take a break, go over my notes again, come back, and I finally wrote it. So I am happy to say that I backed that 10%. So when my cam comes, I almost say comes back. So yeah, when I receive my cam, that 10% should do me justice because I slaved for that 10%. So that is basically just kind of like things that contribute really to year-end fatigue. And I was still giving you a definition. Oh my word, this is so long. I get carried away. I can't remember the last time I did a podcast like this, like have it be researched and add a bit of personal experience. I can't remember. I genuinely can't remember the last time I had to like record something, and it is something that it has been researched just before recording and having to like add your personal experiences to that, and it really feels great. It really feels great. I should have like more episodes like that. So yeah, I'm finally gonna tell you the definition again before we get into the rest of this episode.
We are back, and I am finally ready to tell you about year-end fatigue, or rather tell you what year-end fatigue is without getting distracted, hopefully.
And to be fair, I wasn't necessarily distracted. I just kind of like went on a tangent and like started telling you like context and why. I just really intensely explained. I gave you a depth, an in-depth explanation of what end of semester exhaustion is, and I gave you scenarios, real life examples, lived experiences. So anyway, without explaining anything that is without defining the definition, right? Year-end fatigue is also known as end of year burnout or end of semester exhaustion. It is a phenomenon commonly experienced by university students towards the end of the academic term or year. It is characterized by a feeling of extreme tiredness, mental and physical exhaustion, decreased motivation, and an overall sense of being overwhelmed. Several factors contribute to this year-end fatigue. And I just kind of like really told you about the academic demands that kind of contribute to year-end fatigue, right? The time pressures that we have. So basically I explained to you with regards to like the deadlines that you have a submission on Tuesday in the same week. That is, you have a submission on Tuesday, you have a submission on Wednesday, and then you have a submission on Friday. Chances are you have 5 submissions on Friday. So you also have to like create your own schedule as to, okay, when am I going to start with this assignment, and how long have I known about this assignment, and when am I going to submit it? Because if everything is due on one Friday, chances are you would have had to submit one thing on Thursday of the same week, or you would have had to submit it on the Sunday of the week prior to the deadline. So it's just really a thing of personal management. But trust me, from lived experience and having done this thing for 3 years, this thing called university, trying to bag my degree, yeah, time management is there are people who have figured it out, and I genuinely envy them. I envy people who have figured out how to manage their time, because I am thinking, sure, I can manage my time. I have some kind of like sense of time management, and I always submit on time, right? Like I was very scared this past Friday. It was the first time in 3 years, like I said. It was my first time ever. Let me put it that way, rather. It was my first time in 3 years that I almost missed a submission. And I didn't miss a submission because there wasn't enough time. It was because I was really just that tired, and I was like, I see this thing and I can see that it is due today at 11, but I was like, I can't. And I remember so well, I woke up around, I think I woke up at 7, and the idea was to go to campus. And then I figured that like, the fact that I have to shower to go to campus, which was also another thing. I am a person who like, I will wake up, after I work out, I immediately go shower. On that Friday, I didn't shower, I didn't work out. I only like worked on my assignment for like a couple of, I think it was like close to an hour, worked on it, and then I was like, nah, I'm gonna take a nap. I'm really tired. Like, I could understand the work that I had, what was expected from me, but I really could not bring myself to like type it out, write it, do all of those things that are required of you. And that's when I got to realize that, like, wow, I really am tired. I really am tired because I have so much time. And then I remember when I actually really started was around 2, because I started counting. I was like, okay, I can still make 11, and I want to make 11 because this is one module that is on the top of my list, and I really want to maintain my grades and get even better grades. So how am I going to do that if I am thinking of submitting tomorrow, and whatever mark I get, do I really want 5% to be deducted from that? So that was kind of like the motivation that I gave myself, and I started working. Probably 2 hours later, I was like, no, I am tired. Yes, I'm halfway done, but I am tired. Then I went on to my phone, went onto the group chat, saw that people had gotten their NSFAS money, and I was like, whoa, let me work. Dude, when I'm telling you that I started working, I went onto the group again and I was like, remember that psychology test that we wrote that said something about how financial stress, or rather like stresses and academics don't go hand in hand, something. I was like, dude, that is so true, because like I was so demotivated like a couple of minutes ago, but right now when you all told me that like there's money, like that gave me hope, that gave me a different kind of motivation. The fact that like you have R1 extra in your bank account was so wild. It was so wild. Yes, it's gonna leave, it's gonna go, but the fact that it's there then, dude, I started working and I think I submitted around 9:30. And I hope that the marks will come good. So basically that is also one of the things that contribute to kind of like year-end fatigue, because you've been doing this thing for like 9 months now. You've been doing this thing for like 10 months now. You've been doing it for 11 months, and you realize that like, I am tired. I have been learning this entire year, meeting deadlines this entire year, having to manage my time academically, the relationships I have with people, time for myself, time for God, basically just like you're not taking into account all the time that you have, or rather like you take yourself and like you kind of have to divide your time amongst all these things in order of priority, of most important to least important, I suppose. But the point is, you are prioritizing everything and you're learning to like manage that. And once you figured out time management, it's not to say that there isn't going to be any slip ups. It goes back to the thing I was speaking of about routine, how there's some things that just take you out of routine, and then getting back into it is kind of like a hassle. I think I was on TikTok the other day when I saw a post that said something about your relationship with God is very important, in the sense that like you will have scripture readings every day, but then the moment you don't read scripture, the moment you skip it like once, it becomes a thing that like you skip it twice, and then the third day you probably skip it, but like going back into it and being consistent kind of like gets hard. So basically we need to like, once you do something, just make sure that like, in order to stay consistent, even if you give it 2 minutes, if it's something that you're always doing for 30 minutes or more, just kind of like do it again the following day, the day you don't necessarily feel like doing it, and do it for at least 2 minutes, because now it's a matter of, okay, I showed up, even though you didn't show up holistically. And I don't think that what I'm saying now, that means that it's the same thing that you should do with people. I think that it would be a different situation when it comes to dealing with people. But I think as far as tasks are concerned, it is something to like take into consideration as to how do you deal with time pressures, essentially, because I think that it's a very important thing to know how your life could be spread out, because you're only 21 once, and if that year is wholly consumed by books, you're going to miss out on other social experiences that you could have. So how do you manage the social experiences with, how do you balance the social experiences with your academic life and all your other experiences that you're supposed to have outside of like a social context as well, and outside of an academic context? So this is when you kind of like get to realize the duality of life, I suppose. But I think when we speak of the duality or the polarity of life, it just leaves us to two. And of course, like it could be more, and I'm not trying to get too literal about it, but how do you divide your life evenly? I'm not sure if the 20/80 rule is something that would be useful for this, but I think just a matter of like taking into consideration that you have 24 hours and you are probably up for, I don't know what stats say, and I'm open to being corrected in the comment section, or just send a voice note, a voice message over on Spotify. But I think that we are up for maybe like 16 hours of that 24 hours. But how about like 4 hours is dedicated to this one thing, 3 hours is dedicated to that, 2 hours is dedicated to rest? Because yeah, sure, we sleep during the night, some of us not for 8 hours, but some of us for more than 8 hours. But just essentially taking out time and trying to prioritize all these things, it's still something that I personally have to figure out. I have not figured it out, and honestly, I think like as much as I want to figure it out, a part of me isn't necessarily willing to figure it out. I'm just like, let's put that in next year's to-do list, or what do we call it? What do we call that thingy? Renewal? It's not a renewal list. The one where we do it's not a bucket list either. New Year something something, resolution. Yes, resolution. So dumb. So yeah, just I think I've kind of like given you two things that kind of like contribute towards what is it, year-end fatigue. I think another thing would be lack of sleep, which we have also kind of like spoken of, and this has been something that kind of like is said to kind of like lead to mental health issues. Basically, like it contributes towards loss of memory, because you're not getting enough sleep, so you're forgetting most of the things, because your brain, most of the things you're learning throughout the day and throughout the year, because most of the time your brain is over functioning, it is overwhelmed with all the processes that it has to take in. It's not necessarily storing information correctly, it's not necessarily releasing information correctly, because there's just so much for just this one brain. And mind you, the brain is very big, like it is powerful, more than we actually know, but it's a matter of we also need to allow it to breathe, in a sense. That's why it is so important for us to take rests, to sleep, because it's just the reason I don't like dreaming, because why is my brain replaying events of what happened earlier when it should be resting? Because I will be using it as soon as I wake up. So why is it replaying events? Can it just not chill? But anyway, I suppose part of it is the recollection is also a way of like storing that information that I've seen and learned and absorbed, heard, spoken, all of that throughout the day. So that is actually pretty cool. Another thing that contributes towards this year-end fatigue, because remember, stress also plays a really big role in that, trying to like manage all this time, trying to maintain your grades, not getting enough sleep. Another thing that we don't take into account is, we already spoke about like having a social life, but one of the things that contribute towards this is basically peer pressure or social pressure, in terms of like social media, in terms of like the company we keep, trying to maintain a certain lifestyle. Basically, it's just a lot, really. Remember how I spoke about like you're only 21 once and you can't be spending your entire 11 months of being 21 doing academic work, or whatever age you are, really. Sorry, or whatever age you are, really. So it's just one thing to like take into consideration, that like, sure, you want to have adventures, but just don't do that at the expense of your academics. I think it goes back to the priority chat. Like, what is on top of your priority list? And if you have dedicated 10 hours to your academic work, how many more hours are you left with throughout the day? And is that something that enables you to like, okay, you know what, I deserve this? Because it's not bad going out is not a bad thing, but it's just a matter of kind of like dedicate days to where you're going to do that, because you can't lose life experiences and social experiences on account of being an academic weapon. You get, it also gets problematic. So again, it goes back to duality, it goes back to balance, I suppose. And yeah, so that is pretty much it, I suppose. Other things that like we could consider to play a big role in this is probably like seasons, like summer, winter, finances, family lives, what else? There are literally so many other things that can like contribute towards year-end fatigue and just fatigue in general. But like, of course, towards the end of the year, there's just so much uncertainty about everything, which is also another thing that like contributes towards this year-end fatigue having such a mental toll on many of us, in the sense that like, if you're in matric, half the time you're worrying about how next year is going to pan out for you, what university you're going to, what work you're getting, what kind of learnership you're getting, just a matter of what are you doing with your life, and how am I going to be dealing with being a young adult. And then you get to do your final year of undergrad. It's the same thing again. Okay, am I getting my postgrad? If I am getting my postgrad, what university am I going into? And what are the finances implicated in that? If I am getting a job, where am I getting a job? Do I now have to go back home, or do I now have to find another place to stay at? Just a matter of how does life work out. And then you get those who are in relationships, and then it's a matter of like, okay, this person is from this place, I'm from that place. How do we make it work? Like, is it a matter of like having to let go? So there's really just like a lot of relationships and considerations to take into consideration. I don't know, that sounded so wise in my head. But that's just basically what I'm saying is there's a lot to take into account. There's just really too much to take into account, all for one brain. So basically, I think that while dealing with year-end fatigue and finding the solution to this, I think that like in this podcast already, I have kind of alluded to some solutions. But I think the biggest one to take away from this would be drafting a list of priorities. I think it would be drafting a list of priorities, and also considering that it's the end of the year. It goes back to planning, to the New Year's resolutions again. What it is that I want for myself academically and how I aim to achieve that. What it is that I will be doing in the new year work life related, and how do I intend to achieve that? What kind of people am I hoping to keep in my life, and how do I maintain those relationships? What do I expect my financial life to look like next year, and how do I make that happen? I think those are essentially just kind of like things to take into consideration going into the new year, and planning on drafting that out as well. And then in terms of like academics, I think it would be a matter of like getting one of those big calendars. What do they call them? Year planners. Getting a year planner, looking at how is this going to work, when am I expected to do what, when, and sometimes some of these things like you already have it, but then you'd only know probably around February what's happening, February, March, April-ish, there around, and finally plan out your academic life, plan out your social life as far as you can plan it, really, because those are things that you can't always have planned. And I think that also, like, in terms of life, kind of like have an estimation of when you are expecting to do what, or when you would like to do what. But also with that, don't be rigid. It's good to have a structure, but it's also good to be flexible, because now you're also kind of like able to maneuver should things not go as intended. And I think life, more than planning, is an experience. You never know what to expect. We just plan so we have a general idea of what it is that we are hoping for and what it is that we probably will be doing. But I don't think that all these things are honestly a matter of life and death. Some of them, of course, but what I'm saying is everything happens the way it should, and you also need to play your part in your life, because honestly, no one else is going to do it. It's your life. And with that being said, I am signing out, and I am sending you love and light. You know who I am? I'm Marlies Mackenzie, your host. And from Mac the podcast, you are loved and you are loved.